Gentlemen, good morning. We would like to reinstate that we have at the entrance of this auditorium headsets for simultaneous translation between English and Portuguese. We're going to continue with our international seminar, Artificial Intelligence, Democracy and Elections. We would like to kindly ask you to keep your mobile phones switched off or on silent mode throughout the event. Ladies and gentlemen, to proceed with the works of our thematic panels, we would like to announce the fourth thematic panel, whose topic is integrity of the electoral process in the digital world. His Excellency, the Minister of the Superior Electoral Court, André Ramos Tavares, will be the chair of this panel. Member of the German Bundestag, the Federal Parliament, Jens Zimmermann, who's taking part virtually, CEO of Lupa Agency Fighting Disinformation, Natália Leal, and also the head of Center of Technology and Society of Getúlio Vargas Foundation and professor of the Law School of Getúlio Vargas Foundation, Luca Belli, the head of disputes or Google Brazil, Thais Tesser. And we give the floor to Mr. Minister André Ramos Tavares as the chair of the panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to initially greet everyone present, Natália, Thais, Luca. I'd like to greet those who are present here remotely. Jens Zimmermann, I'd like to thank everyone who are able to be here to share their experiences on this topic, on the integrity of the electoral process in the world. We know that there is a great paradigm change that we had over the past years in terms of the age we are living in, the digital age, which incorporates the new technologies in an extremely fast way. It is not just new technologies, but they are increasingly more new technologies that increasingly change in a structural way our living model in society. This affects several dimensions. Today, we're going to address certain dimensions when we address the problem of integrity of elections at the digital age. How to protect this idea. The idea of the panel is how to protect the electoral process, our elections, how to bring greater security to the electoral process, considering our new reality that is already implemented. Without further ado, I am going to give the floor initially to Jens Zimmermann, who is a member of the German Bundestag, the federal parliament. He studied business administration at the Catholic University of Eisenstadt-Gstaad and the Regent's College in London from 2002 and 2007. And he has a degree in business administration. He is a PhD student in the Department of Service Management 2007 to 13, member of various organizations, including the Democratic Social Party of Germany and the Labor Union of Construction, Agriculture and Environment. Member of various boards, local boards, executive boards in Germany, and of the German Federal Parliament, as already announced. I thank once again for your participation, your presence, and your availability to be here with us today, even if remotely. Jens Zimmermann, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and bon dia. I'm very happy to be at this conference, and I think it is an excellent idea to bring this conference and this panel together. I've been to Sao Paulo only 2 weeks ago, so I would have loved to join you in person, but now I have business back at home. And the question of the integrity of elections is a topic that affects all democratic countries around the world. And so I think these are discussions we are having that apply to many, many countries. I would say that we have to, especially if we're talking about new technologies, we have two aspects when we're talking about the integrity. On the one side, we have, I would say, the factual integrity. So that at the end of the day, every vote counts and every vote is counted, and we have a precise result. So this is the one aspect that is complicated. And on the other hand, we have the trust in the result as such, as we've seen in the US after the last presidential election, also as we've seen in Brazil. It is one thing to have a result, and it is another thing to have the confidence and the trust in that result. And I think these are two very important aspects. But looking firstly to the process of elections as such. As far as I know, Brazil is using a lot of technology within the voting process. And I think this is something where you have to be very cautious. You have a lot of experience in that. But for example, in Germany, it is forbidden by our constitutional court to use voting computers, to use electronic voting machines. In Germany, we only use paper and pen for the electoral process. This can lead to other problems, no questions asked, but it gives one great advantage. At the end of every voting day, all the ballots are put on a big table. Everybody can see the ballots, and everybody can see how the counting is going. And I've done that dozens of times myself in my local hometown. And if somebody around the table from some political party is saying, no, I don't think the result is correct, you can recount. You can do it all in all over again. So if you're using more technology, you have to create that trust by other means. And I think it is crucial to have the opportunity for everybody taking part in the election to understand how the systems are working and that the systems are working. So I would strongly suggest that especially before the voting starts, in the weeks and months before, that you use like penetration tests, that you give also academia and scientists opportunities to make sure that the system is working. But this is only the first part of the system. In Germany and in Europe, we had problems with the systems that are adding all the results from all polling stations around the country together. Because it is, for somebody who wants to interfere with the election, it is really handy if you can manipulate the software that is adding up all the results from the whole country. And unfortunately, this software is usually coming from smaller companies, and it is used only, let's say, once every other year. So it is not used quite often. So it is absolutely crucial to make sure that the software that is used to create the final national or statewide result, that this software is secure. And the problem really is that is sometimes it is very old and it is not protected against known cyber threats. So this would be one of my learnings from Europe, from Germany. Make sure that this software is protected, and I think it is also necessary to make plausibility tests. So, for example, to have algorithms that look into the results that are added up together if they are plausible, because we know from former results about how the difference between different regions or different cities are. And if you see that in some regions the results are probably not plausible, then this could lead to further investigation and making sure that that it is not fraudulent. So I think this is very important. And again, my suggestion with all digital aspects of the actual voting process would be plausibility tests. We had also NGOs in Germany when voting computers were still allowed. We had an NGO which is called the CCC, the Chaos Computer Club, which is, I mean, these are crazy hackers, but they are really the best breed, and they tried to manipulate these computers simply to show what is possible. And if you have friendly hackers like that on board, you can try to find loopholes in the process. So that would be something that is very important. In addition to that, I have been myself an electoral observer. So I've been part of the OSCE, so the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which is doing missions also around the world. So I've been an electoral observer during the 2016 election in the US. And I think that these independent electoral observers can help to increase the integrity of the electoral process. Because if you have people from a mixed background from all around the world that will go out, observe the process, and make their reports, this really can help. And I would also emphasize that the OSCE is also doing long-term missions, because interference in the electoral process does not only start on election day. It can start much in advance. So, for example, who will have the opportunity to vote? And so we see these problems all around the US, especially. So long-term missions, which start 6 or 12 months before the general election, I think this definitely can help. So, but this is the technical part of the election. And now imagine everything went smooth. Many people went out, casted their vote, and now you have a final result. You declare a winner. And usually this was the part when the decision was made and the winner was cheering, and the contenders that lost were accepting the result. But we know during these times anything can happen. So we saw what Donald Trump did, simply not accepting the result. And I think here, again, the electoral observers can help because they give external proof to the process and to the integrity of the process. But we also have to have social media, for example, on the radar, because members of or contenders of the election can try to use social media, other means of communication to delegitimize the results, simply saying, no, there's fraud and this result is wrong and we won't accept it. So I think it is important to have the social media platforms that they know about their responsibility, so that they are extra cautious at election day and the day after the election, because a lot of regulation stops at election day. So the question about paid content, what is allowed, and I think it's also crucial to make sure that this regulation does not offer some loopholes, and to think about legislation around that, because what we've seen is that in the German and the European context, quite often Russia is trying to interfere with our public debates. We've seen what happened around the Brexit referendum in Great Britain, where we knew that some users on social media were precisely targeted and tried to bring them up against a membership in the European Union, for example. So social media platforms have a very, very high responsibility when it comes to the trust in the electoral process. They can help to increase the trust in, for example, offering information where electing or where voting is possible. They can offer help to find the proper polling station. Things like that can really help. But at the same time, it is absolutely necessary that social media platforms prevent external or internal actors from spreading misinformation about the electoral process and from spreading misinformation about the actual result. I think this is extremely important, and I would say that legislation around that is an option, because I will be absolutely clear. Social media platforms are multinational corporations, and from my experience, their main interest is the interest of their shareholders, and every process they have to additionally implement, every moderator they have to hire, is decreasing their profit. And this is something corporations usually are not doing voluntarily. So I would strongly urge in having a proper legislation around that, and also to make sure that, for example, especially around election day, all the big social media platforms have enough moderators speaking Portuguese. So what we've seen in the digital committee in the Bundestag, where I'm for the Social Democrats, the ranking member, is that after Elon Musk bought the platform formerly known as Twitter, they fired 50% of their staff. And under the Digital Services Act in Europe, every platform has the obligation to give a transparency report every quarter. And from that transparency report, for example, we know that Twitter has, for example, in my neighboring country of Poland, only one moderator that speaks Polish. And this person is responsible for 3 to 4 million users on that platform in my neighboring country, in Poland. And we also know from the numbers that there are only a few dozen moderators at X now that speak Portuguese. So I think this is another aspect. We have to make sure that the social media platforms follow their own rules quite often, but also the rules that have been passed through parliament. So that would be my final thought. And again, thank you very much for having me with that conference. And yeah, thank you. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very much. I would like to thank for sharing with us your experience in Germany concerning this topic of the use of technologies in the electoral process. Your reflection shows us very important points, and they're very important for us to reflect about this period we are going on now. Before I turn the floor, I would like to make a brief comment. I believe that we have always mentioned that we are living a moment when there is an encounter of three very important factors that shows us the need of really reflecting deeply about this topic. The first factor is the fact that, at least in Brazil, we had a good period without names, without a regulation. And we are still fighting here in Brazil, trying to have a broader regulation, not only in the electoral process, but here in Brazil, the Electoral Superior Court has a normative capacity. And because of this, this is a differential of this court and allows the court to establish a regulation. And this has been done this year of 2024. We saw some resolutions being approved, some of which, as you know, those who are here and do a follow-up on that, those are regulations exactly about the use of new technologies, especially artificial intelligence, during the electoral period and the use of the deep fake and fake news. This is the first aspect. The second point of encounter that we live is what we call extreme times. It's not my expression, it's from Yashamal. So we are living extreme times. A good part of this happens because of the new technologies, not all to them, but the reality is there. We have to face this point. And I believe that a last movement that somehow is also converging with all of this and potentialize some effects are exactly the new technologies, artificial intelligence, and very particularly, according to my opinion, the digital platforms. We are seeing today that there is an economy of digital platforms, and not because of e-commerce. I always like to remember that it's more than this. It's not a case of talking about this topic, but the digital platforms that are, as well remembered, multinational corporations at least those big digital platforms that actually are global platforms operating in a global scale. These platforms currently they have a dominion. They represent a new agent on the political electoral scenario. And this is also that we need to understand in terms of knowing what to do and how to behave in face of this new reality. They are a new political agent, and they also allow the instrumentalizations. They are instrumentalized by different other political agents with the money power, and they potentialize all that. So these are just reflections that I provide after the excellent presentation done here, which I thank. And in the sequence, I turn the floor to Dr. Natalia Liao, which is CEO of Lupa. It's fighting disinformation. She is a journalist, expert in human resources, and with a master's in companies management. In May, she has been chosen by the International Center for Journalists, ICFJ, to receive the award Knight International from Journalism of 2021. Natalia was recognized because of his work in fighting disinformation after fact checking and immediate and media education. She has a lot of experience here in Brazil. She was reporter. She was chief editor in the production of newspapers like Bands, Terra Zero Hora, Diário Catarinense, Poder 370. In the past year, she focused her work in daily coverage of the economy policies using multi-platforms and in development of digital products. And she worked since November 2017 in producing content from Lupa. She studied in the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in terms of human resources. Thank you for your presence, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation from Fundação Getúlio Vargas and the Superior Electoral Court to be in this very important debate, which we address the challenges of AI within democracy and elections contexts. I come from a place, as the minister mentioned, which is journalism. It's slightly different from what we have been addressing here in, well, yesterday, a place that is more connected to technological development, to law. And in journalism, we bring a bit slightly different viewpoint, but with a lot of connecting points to those challenges that we have been mapping. It is not news to say that the journalistic industry has been going through a credibility crisis. We have data from the Reuters Institute from 2023 showing that only 43% of Brazilians trust the journalistic industry. This data is important for us to understand the movement that we observe from the sanction of digital platforms, which is the rupture of this intermediary that journalism has traditionally been to take information to people and make a differentiation between what matters and what can be just considered when we're looking at the world and trying to understand what is going on. Today, we have less than half of people that consume news, somehow journalism information, believing and looking at believable the information that stems from this industry. In 2015, just to have a comparison point, this figure was 62%. In less than 10 years, we have a very significant transformation of this credibility and the level of reliability that journalism inspires in society overall. In addition, we have a very clear change in the consumption of news. Today, most, according to Reuters Institute, opening up to a more global viewpoint, about 30% of people today consume news only via social media. In 2015, the data was 22%. And we have an increase in consumption via social media and a reduction via news websites. All of it is connected to this reliability crisis. The journalism model that is of public interest has direct impact in the integrity of information, especially in electoral contexts. When today we have not-for-profit organizations and companies that practice journalism, especially journalism fighting disinformation that is within the public interest journalism from philanthropic activities or providing their services. And this has a price to be paid for that. Philanthropy for journalism in a world scale is decreasing. There's less money for that. Funds are being allocated to more specific places, and there is not, or just recently, we started having a debate as to how important financial sustainability of journalism is so that we can ensure this pillar of informational integrity in electoral context, but also in the context of safeguarding democracy as a whole, not only during electoral processes. We must have a debate today. Yesterday, João Branch, the secretary, mentioned the aspect of financial sustainability of journalists. We have world funds that are being set up to discuss this debate. The issue we have to have from the standpoint of society that this debate is important and journalism is an important pillar within this system that ensures information integrity. Also, within the electoral context, one of the main challenges that we have over these periods is efficient monitoring of the digital environment. In the past few years, we've seen a reduction of transparency of platforms regarding their data and also in the access to applications that allow us to monitor from tools developed by the very journalistic organizations or organizations that dedicate themselves to monitoring this debate in a broader way. So it is not secret to anyone, for example, that X, former Twitter, no longer allows us to collect data in a structured way to follow up the debate as to how well she had a little pun there. How information is propagated in the environment. We have very little transparency regarding actions that are actually taken by those platforms within the agreements that are made during elections or outside the period of elections. This transparency is key for us to be able to monitor the environment and provide effective responses to society from the standpoint of journalism, whistleblowing, mapping out, building knowledge on this environment that helps us outline more effective strategies to fight damaging information that circulates in there. If we have no transparency, we will not be able to check that and take to the audience information that help us not only to report and punish and to set some boundaries to the evil players within this space, but also we won't be able to outline new strategies that allow us to face the dangers represented by those actions taken by platforms many times. And lastly, within the context of challenges, I'd like to highlight the use of AI. Of course, we are here to talk a bit about it. Yesterday, we had some approaches bringing the perspective that AI may be an ally in detecting fake information and speeding up some processes within journalism, not uh, diminishing or letting go human intelligence and people that work in journalistic organizations, but some processes of AI are important for us to detect fake information faster in the response of fake information. The problem is that we have systematically been pointing out that the tools of AI are very full of shortcomings of that. They have to be connected to a reliable database so that the detection can be structured and reliable. And well, this is not rare to see AI tools that reinforce racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes, and this is very dangerous when we are addressing not a replacement, but actually a support to the fact-checking work, the fighting disinformation work, and the tools that we have at hand today that are of AI. They're not yet prepared to help us in an effective way in increasing the health of the digital environment. They must be better trained, they must be connected to better bases, and they must have a bit more development of their intelligence and their learnings from reliable bases so that they can actually help us in this work, both of detection as well as accountability or any other front that we would act upon fighting disinformation. Now, moving towards our strategies that we use and that we can use within the electoral processes. The collaboration to me is fundamental. Since 2018, Lupa and other journal, journalistic outlets work with courts like the Superior Electoral Court to detect fake information. We have a dialogue with all the assistants or the news agencies of all these courts to have a fast response when we have some case of disinformation coming up and impacting public debate. And this collaboration must be consistent. And I believe the court also has been endeavoring to do that. And it must have this vision that journalism is a very important part, and journalism faces its own challenges. And many times our response is conditioned to such challenges, and we do our best to work together. In a second aspect, we must look at the actions of platforms. We know that the platforms have celebrated agreements constantly with the Superior Electoral Court, but on other fronts, but those agreements are extremely generic, and they must be a bit clearer regarding the actions to be taken by those platforms once there is information that somehow hinders public debate is faced and the environment within social media. We also believe that the cooperation terms that are signed must be available to public consultation on the pages where we have the community policies of the platforms. Those policies, they many times guide the audience towards what to do when they face some fake information or some harmful information. And it is important that platforms provide this transparency at this level as to what is the agreement signed with the court or some electoral authority for a specific electoral process. It's important that the policies of the platforms consider national contexts and the languages. Zimmerman talked a bit about this, but many of the policies developed today by the large technology companies just consider the language used in platforms and national contexts. This is actually neglected by the big techs. We may add that it's not necessary to draft a specific policy for a small country, but we're talking about Brazil. It's the fifth largest market of social media in the world. 84% of people use social media daily. In the case of WhatsApp and YouTube, over 40% of the population uses to consume news and over 70% for anything from tutorials to learning, education, etc. And it can not be hard to consider looking at this potential market, both the language as well as the peculiarities of the policies to develop their community policies. This has to be demanded, and this is something we have been talking about for a long time, and we have moved forward very little. Lastly, I'd like to talk about valuing local media. Regional newspapers have the lowest rate of discredit amongst the reference outlets. When we look at journalism, about 80%, 18% say they believe less. I don't believe what is on the local newspaper. I think it's a high level or index when we compare to other reference outlets. It's a lower index. Collaborations with local journalists may help rebuild this bridge that has been lost between journalism and people from the ascension of the social media platforms as intermediary or as this tool that allowed us not to have to no longer have an intermediary between people and information. The connections made on local level may help rebuild this credibility of journalism and the understanding that journalism is an important part of what we do here. And also, uh, I don't want to talk too much about the work of Lupa. You can visit our website, which is lupa.news. We are on a website. We work for journalism and media education. We understand media education as a mid-long term project and reconstruction of this connection between people and information mediated by journalism. But I just like to highlight questions that were brought up yesterday as well, that this viewpoint that social platforms are a new public square, they are a space of exercising citizenship or freedom of speech. And as the minister reminded us, for some time we operated with no rules, but this needs to end. The platforms are economic entities, they are companies that have little or no transparency on the algorithms, and it's okay. This can be an industrial secret, but they are hindering our day-to-day lives and leaving our debate on social media very, very sick. And we really must have a global movement so that this can be reduced, stopped, so that we have actions that are more effective to ensure that the public debate on the digital environment be healthy and having different pillars. So we don't have a silver bullet here. No solution works alone. Collaboration is key, but the recognition that the space is mediated economically based on economic interests, and this has to be considered when we have actions against that. It's fundamental at the moment. Thank you very much.
Bom, só posso agradecer a Natália Leal pela sua exposição.
I'd like to thank Natalia Leal for her presentation. Lupa does fundamental work that is good to all of us. I won't speak for over a minute, I promise. Just to consider the following. Actually, on some platforms, for example, TikTok, the number of people, of users that inform mainly or exclusively through that platform is extremely high. So depending on the platforms, and many times the age bracket we're working with, there's almost monopoly of the supposed informational journalism overall. And this is why we all have to work together to actually strengthen the social media professional journalism. There's actually a bill at the National Congress on the sustainability of journalism. This is extremely important. It's important for democracy. There is no democracy if we do not strengthen serious professional journalism that exists, but that somehow has had its displaced because of the new technologies and the use of new technologies. Still on this topic, I actually, well, if we are facing a new public square, this discourse is very much used on, well, the sphere is different. We are at another space. It's a digital space, well, a virtual space.
Tudo seria diferente. Então, preciso, eu sempre digo, tomar realmente dois cuidados. Primeiro,
we have to take care of certain things. First, on one hand, we have the discourse that came from Silicon Valley that is easy to buy. It's very seducing or enticing that new technologies came to solve all the problems. Digital solutionism, we have to be careful with that. Of course, technologies are essential. They are part of our day-to-day. We do not see ourselves anymore distance, abandoning those technologies. It is not possible. I criticize, but I always say the following. I criticize in a constructive way, trying to uh, keep our eyes wide open to that. It's not that I'm a fan of sending faxes, for example, but we have to understand dynamics in depth, how these things actually happen. And this today, combined to this discourse, we have this supposed neutrality of technology. Technology is not neutral because it's always being used. And the use of technology may be good or bad. And this is what we must always be aware of and mindful. And behind technology's most advanced ones, especially platforms, there is a company. And there are business interests that are legitimate, but that we cannot leave aside supposedly because we would no longer be working with the business concept, but a new concept that would be platforms. This would not make any sense. But actually, I'd like to thank once again, and now I'd like to give the floor to Professor Luca Belli, who's professor of the School of Law at Getúlio Vargas Foundation, and coordinator of the Center of Technology as a Side PhD from the Pantheon SAS, University 2014, Master in Law for the Università degli Studi di Torino, Professor of Law and member of faculty of the graduation, strictly sentence law, regulation of FGV Foundation in Rio, lecturer of LLM and the law program of the Fundação Getúlio Vargas, full-time professor and coordinator of the Technology and Society Centers. He coordinates the project Cyber Risk and Excellent Internet Governance, protection of social data, BRICS countries, author of over 50 publications on regulation of Internet, digital policies. His works have been mentioned by journals by The Economist, Forbes, Financial Times, China Daily, Le Monde, BBC, The Hill, El País, and La Stampa, and used by many intergovernmental organizations and regulated organizations. Lucas is a member of the board of Alliance for Affordable Internet, director of the Latin of the Conference on Computers Privacy and Data Protection, and editor of the International Data Privacy Law of the Lawful Oxford University Press. Before working at Getúlio Vargas Foundation, he worked as an expert of neutrality for the European Council. Professor Belli, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you for this excellent introduction and the invitation. It is an honor to be here with you. I would like to thank my colleagues from FGV Communications for the organization of the event. And I have 3 points to share with you. The first is concerning cybersecurity and how the convergence of artificial intelligence, elections, and cybersecurity makes us reconsider radically how to deal with these convergences, these intersections. And the second will be about the structure of the algorithm interfaces and the platforms and the self-regulation of the social networks And the last one will be the elephant in the room, because the access to internet, mobile internet here in Brazil, and also in the global south in a broader scale, it has been in a certain way announced yesterday by Dr. Lillian, a point, but not has been explained in the details and practical consequences that it brings. First of all, cyber security. I think it's very important to understand that in the past 2 or 3 years, the technological evolution allowed the democratization of artificial intelligence. So techniques that until 3 years ago it was the dominion of private and extremely specialized agents, they were not accessible. Yesterday we mentioned about the fakes, the techniques of changing and production of text. And this is very interesting because the creation of comments that are the reposting that are the algorithm criteria that increase visibility on the platforms, they can be increased artificially in a much simpler way currently. And those who study cybersecurity know that most of the techniques to reach a target has a psychological background study. In psychology, the inclusion of a majority, in effect, the case in the many of people support a certain idea is a very known process, because typically the human brain, when many people agree with a certain opinion surrounding them, they are believed to they are take to believe that this is reality. If you don't understand that the situation was reduced artificially, it's very easy for you to become a victim of that strategy. And no, not many people query the social networks, and they are not in a moment of psychological awakening necessary to understand that this technique is being used. These strategies were enlarged enormously by the algorithm capacities of artificial intelligence. I have a very good example. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, if you wanted to make a comment on a post, you could replicate thousands of times 10, 15, 20 comments. Today, with only one touch, any tool of artificial intelligence that is regenerative can create 2,000 different points and that you can promote in 10 minutes. You can even program on different times the disclosure of these comments in different platforms. And so the tools of artificial intelligence not only create new kinds of threats, not only scale the threats, but they can change dynamically the behaviors that was easily to feed and mitigated in the past. So in terms of threats and cyber threats, the safety of the democratic processes is one of the essential points on cybersecurity. And I also would like to mention that I believe it's a very important point, perhaps it has not been highlighted yet, is that at the end of last year, the government created a new national policy of cybersecurity. We have now a committee for cybersecurity. I was included as one of the 25 members, like my acting professor. And I'm going to open up brackets here. If you ask why a person with this not very convincing accent is in a national park, I have to specify that I was born in Italy, but I am Brazilian because my mother was Brazilian. That's why a person with this accent can participate of a national committee of cybersecurity. Closing brackets. This is a point that I mentioned many times as a council as one of the priorities that should have been included in the proposal of national strategy. And most of the national strategies around the world, cyber attacks of means of weakening the democratic processes became a priority in the past years. Not only attacks from external agents, governments, private agents with a political and economic interest, but also in-house ages. And here we need a cooperation between experts and disinformation that evaluate the impact of fake news and disinformation, and experts in cybersecurity that are essential to identify the origin, the assignment, which is not a peculiarity of the researcher. And even for those who make these campaigns are experts in cybersecurity. The examples mentioned yesterday, but if you want to have a less academic reading, there's a good article by The Guardian that was launched last year. These are former members of the Israeli intelligence that create campaigns of disinformation by order. It's disinformation by service, so mass manipulation by service. And this is a business model that is very lucrative. So this is a priority for cybersecurity. And why this strategy is particularly interesting. We are going to the second consideration that I want to make today. It's about infrastructure or technical architecture of the platforms that we use. Those are platforms with a design and interfaces that are created to capture the attention, concentrate the attention of people, and collect data at the same time, which is a business model of the platform, nothing illegal or questionable. It's a business model, capture attention and collect data. These data are used for refining, and the interface that at the same time captures attention, profiles, and manages to suggest content based on the interests. It is the ideal environment for disinformation campaigns, of manipulation by order. So clearly, I don't want to say that this is the objective of the infrastructure, but the negative externality of this kind of infrastructure facilitates this bad behavior. And interesting to understand that the reasons through which our timelines receive content are not simply because of what we have chosen to receive. What is in your timeline is not simply your interests, the people that you follow. It's mainly the contents that are ranking with those of higher visibility that can be artificially manipulated. On the other side, what is proposed by because it's a paid content. And here we have to go back to a second element of extreme care that we must have, because these contents, they can be ventilated. My colleagues of FGV Communicações and other partners from LOPA, they did a test with the Google Ads between the 10th and the 20th of April. It was an experiment that was headed by my colleague, and they tried to include 38 ads with content that is clearly breaching the terms of use of Google Ads and contents of discrimination, hate speech against LGBTQ plus communities, and disinformation content about elections, such as the TSEs decided to stop the vote for those who are older than 65 years. The new decision of the TSE makes it mandatory the use of the vaccination badge before you can vote. And most of these proposals of subscribed ads were accepted. The only those who are not accepted is those who had asked for an identity check. But look what makes me open this consideration. Even considering the last movements of TSA that restrict the political ad, there is a great vulnerability in this kind of regulatory framework that was created, because the target of these resolutions are politicians, parties, and collegation. And people who are independent and those who are part of these campaigns also, they are not the target of these statements. So if Luca Belli wants to promote disinformation, he can. There are hundreds of colleagues who Cabelli that work with him politically in a campaign, perhaps located in different regions they want to promote. They can still today. And I liked very much that after the studios, Google announced that they were going to change their rules. I think this is a very positive impact of the study. We don't know the study just for the sake of you. We do the study to help to find an efficient solution. It's a very positive impact. When the Google announced a week later that they were going to restrict this kind of content, but I believe there is still a big loophole to be explored. And then I come to my third point, the economic consideration about the access of internet in Brazil and more encompassing in the global south. Since 2014, 2015, the so-called zero rating models were introduced. That is, most of the access plans of the internet that you have, they don't have unrestricted, unlimited access. Perhaps people of high income do have, but Brazil access to a limited uh, access to internet costs more 15 to 20% of a minimum wage. So there is a very limited portion of the population that can afford it. So there are very specific points after years and years of continuing being criticized these models. SEDIC, which is an agency of the NIC.br, made a very good study showing that only 22% of the Brazilian population have access to everything in terms of connectivity, can use internet as they wish. They can do internet to attack fact checking. If you have something that you don't know if it's a lie or a truth in the family group, how can you control if when you do fact checking, you pay for the access of internet, but to remain in the social network is subsidized. This is the reality of 78 at least percent of the Brazilians and the reality of most of the global south. The great majority of people considered as connected as internet users, they're users of social network actually. So it's impossible for them to do fact checking. It's so expensive. And it's even absurd considering since 2014, 10 years, it was adopted the Act of Internet that prohibits the discrimination of applications, prohibiting this discriminatory treatment. And this is assured in the regulation in 2016 that also prohibits discriminatory treatment. So in Brazil, if there is a place in the world where this kind of conduct could be easily eliminated and considered as illegal as Brazil, but this has not been done in the past 8 years. And what is the result? Most of the people, as a result, and most of the people in the classes C, D, and E of the population, the poorer layers of the population, that are those also that don't have the chance of having had the psychological training to understand that most of people in front of their timeline are artificially created to manipulate the information. So these three considerations, the existence of the use of these strategies to influence people, the fact that there are enormous vulnerabilities on how the structure of the platforms are created and how self-regulation should be implemented. And also the fact that most of people are either being actual users of social networks and not internet, this creates the ingredients of the recipe for democratic chaos. I apologize for being so pessimistic. I apologize for being so pessimistic to close my presentation with this injection of optimism, but I believe it's necessary to act very fast and consider the different dimensions, the interconnection of those different dimensions, and with all the respect to the proposals of containing fake news that are debated in the Congress, I believe that this kind of regulation won't solve the problem. We need a more systemic vision of the problem to be able to solve it. Thank you very much. Well, I thank Professor Luca Belli for his presentation, very intriguing, and because of the time, I will change immediately, giving the floor to Dr. Thais Zatessa. She is head of litigation of Google in Brazil, master's degree by the University of São Paulo, with MBA by the Program of Continuous Education by the Polytechnical School of the University of São Paulo. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister. I'd like to greet my panel colleagues. I'd like to thank, on behalf of Google and YouTube, for the invitation of the Superior Electoral Court and Getúlio Vargas Foundation to take part of this event today to talk a bit about our initiatives related to elections integrity, how we intend to bring and connect Brazilian voters to quality information. We both on Google and YouTube, we understand many of the challenges that have been brought up here, but both by Natalia and Jens and Luca. And I'd like to bring up what we've been doing over the recent years to overcome part of the challenges that are constant. And we are on the day-to-day trying to bring different solutions to those problems that are always renewed. I would like to focus a bit on Google's mission specifically towards elections. Google was set up in 1998 with the mission of organizing information in the world and turning them useful and accessible to all. But specifically regarding elections, our mission is to take information from official sources and support voters in their search for reliable and useful information so that they can make their journey to the ballots in an informed way. We believe that well-informed society may make good choices, and this is how we have been contributing to our Brazilian voters. Here, I would like to make a special highlight to our partnership to the Superior Electoral Court that has been key so that we can highlight information from official sources. Google, since 2014, has been signing partnerships with the higher or Superior Electoral Court to bring quality information to Brazilian voters. This partnership started in a very limited way to be able to distribute the results of elections in real time on Google, and this scope has been expanded, and this has been done every 2 years during electoral periods. Here, it's a bit of our experience. This is why I like to bring slides, because they show a bit what we actually do. This is a bit of an example of 2022 of the kind of experience that we provide to our users, distributing official information from TSE, the Superior Electoral Court, how to vote, how to obtain the voter's card. So there are quality information being distributed from official sources to Brazilian voters directly on the Google search. The 2022 elections, since we have monitored 2004, have been the most searched elections on the Google search engine. About 240 million times those resources have been presented on Google search in 2022. On voting days, both the first and second run-up, the real-time searches represented about 30% of the searches of those days. We know that our users search on Google, and this information that comes directly from the Superior Court, Electoral Court, is important so that voters can connect to the court's information. We also work with fact-checking agencies. One of our initiatives is with Brasilia, the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism that created centers of electoral fact-checking with over 60 journalists and methodologies and fact-checking tools. 31 outlets have been trained through new hubs set up throughout Brazil in 27 units of the federation with about 900 checks made and published during state elections in 2022. And at Google Play, we also, along with the TSE or Superior Electoral Court, we intend to do this during the elections period. We organize something like a store dedicated to electoral cycle with specific apps linked to elections. Some apps of the electoral justice as e-título, so which is actually the card, the voter card, TSE, and Comprova, which has been developed with the support of Google, that is recognized as the first fact-checking app in Brazil. I'm going to go over to YouTube and how we've been supported elections with accountability on YouTube. It's important to stress that when we talk about YouTube, I'm going to talk about the principles that some of you must be aware, but to us on YouTube, it is very important for our users that people that seek and watch videos on YouTube have access to healthy and safe content. We want to create a community of creators and users that have access to healthy and truthful. The people that violate our content should not be on the platform. So this looks a bit strange. The 4 Rs: remotion, recommendation, reduction, and reward. Just to tell you, when we put on the screen, it looks a bit strange. Removal is removing contents that violate the guidelines of the community of YouTube. We have several guidelines in the community, and many of them are related to contents associated to elections. We also have the recommendation of reliable sources of news, precisely to heighten quality information, including information connected to elections. We have the reduction of the impact of borderline content related to elections included, and we recognize and reward new publishers, campaigns, and political content creators that are responsible. Here are some examples of what our guidelines in the community are. Many of them have impacts, I would say, regarding contents that political electoral, especially connected to disinformation. Others too, I'm going to give some details further on. I would say that 3 of them are specifically created for political electoral contests or civic contests. One of them, I hear there's a point I'd like to stress, which was somehow brought up by Jens and Natalia. They are policies that, although they're global, they are analyzed with a local magnifying glass. When we look at suppression of electors and votes, it's a policy in which content that somehow tries to discourage voters to vote. And that brings, for example, some content that talks about day, time, and place of voting in a misleading or deceitful way. This content will be removed from the platform. Obviously, this policy has to be analyzed in the light of the rules and the local views. Do we have global policies? And they have to be analyzed in many cases, and this is one of them, with a local magnifying glass, so that we have local efficacy. This will vary according to jurisdiction. Eligibility of candidates is likewise a content that brings deceitful information on what the requirements are for eligibility of candidates in a local context also violates the YouTube policies based on the guidelines of the community must be removed. Likewise, policy that somehow can interfere in the democratic process, that can somehow interfere, cause any kind of turmoil to avoid voters to vote, be able to vote, to arrive or reach voting or places. So these are policies that are in effect YouTube directly linked to elections. All our process of revision or connected to the fulfillment of those policies is transparent. By default, we quarterly publish a report with information and figures linked to the fulfillment of our, I would say, of our community guidelines. Here are some figures linked to our past quarter 2023 that has already been published. We don't yet have the figures of the first quarter this year. So globally, in the last quarter 2023, we had over 9 million videos removed, 20.5 million channels removed, and 1.1 billion plus of comments removed. These policies apply not only to the contents of the videos, but also to the contents of the comments to the videos made by YouTube users overall. Here, interesting number, just to give you an idea as to how important it is for us to keep the community that creates and uses YouTube safe and healthy. The community understands how the guidelines operate, how our policies work. So this is the rate of views of violating contents, as we call them. That helps us measure the amount of materials removed. In 2017, every 10,000 videos, we removed about 63 to 72. In the past, the last report, we're talking about 11 to 12. So we have, in the past few years, a reduction that is significant of this metrics, which means that we are able to remove much more. I'm going to talk a bit about the effort on the other hand. We talked a bit how YouTube removes the videos that violate the guidelines of the community, and how do we heighten quality information linked to reliable sources. I say we have two major sources to do this work. First, highlighting reliable sources, and the other one, providing context. Two major action lines. The first of them is actually highlighting reliable voices and sources through the results of searches, through the provision of breaking news. So elections we consider relevant events. In the breaking news of YouTube, you find reliable sources. Also in the tab of main news and health part, a specific tab, you find reliable voices. And the informative panels that take users to an external link. Here during elections, we usually have, in 2022, we had the panels that would lead users to the Superior Electoral Court websites with specific information and information on given topics. Those are panels that take users to an experience to reliable external source to obtain information. We also have the specific word on YouTube, different from what I mentioned about Google, regarding fighting information, fact-checking, and political debate. So actually fighting disinformation and support to political debate with some specific channels, the Jogo Limpo, Clean Game program, Nosso Papo Rato, the podcast Para Edição de Vidro, so walls are glass, and also elections on internet. I'd like to talk a bit of figures that give materiality to what I'm exemplifying here on the elections of 2022. Between 25 November and 6 November 2022, 85% of results of videos and searches related to the 2022 elections on YouTube were from reliable sources news. Until November that year, 6.5 billion we had in showcasing of panels of information related to elections with banners of public utility, including the results of elections, which are those banners, those panels that I mentioned to you that lead to external sources. 10,000 videos were removed, 2.5 thousand channels included due to violating the guidelines of the community, and about 84% of those videos were removed even before reaching 100 views. And lastly, I have very little time. Can I talk a bit about AI? Our accountability. Everybody talks about AI here. I'd like to talk a bit about it. This slide, well, doesn't look very nice on our presentation, but the content ID, that is a tool that is very well known that uses AI to protect copyright by those that have copyrights worldwide within YouTube, as how we've been using AI to improve our policies and to apply our policies regarding disinformation content, how we've been working so that our creators, the creative community on YouTube, can best use those tools to develop and boost the use of creativity in their contents. So we may use AI not only to improve and boost, let's say, the creation on YouTube, making our creators to have an outreach to their audiences and to make our users get what they want on YouTube. And AI turns YouTube more accessible. Many of you have seen automatic transcription, so automatic captioning on YouTube. They have been on YouTube since 2019. They are only possible due to AI. And we have lip recognition thanks to AI. This is what enables accessibility to contents on YouTube. But we also expect AI to help us increasingly more to detect contents that violate our policies. This detection is already made with the use of AI and human resources, and we hope that this can move forward in terms of the potential of AI. And today we have an approach for synthetic and manipulated content, a bit in line of what we have been seeing in the resolutions that have been published by the Superior Electoral Court that the minister has mentioned. So we can identify unrealistic contents, as we call it. There are contents that benefit from the use of AI. Many times improving an image, a photo is something that is acceptable, but the other thing is a content that is totally unrealistic, that is expected, that is unrealistic. The existence of a unicorn, everybody knows it's unrealistic, but something that seems to be real but has been produced by AI. And labeling. So videos start being labeled in those cases in their description or on the player, either or. So this has been our approach, and this is in effect actually on YouTube. So those are my remarks. Once again, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time. Thank you. I'd like to thank Thais Tesser. Google actually has been a partner of the Superior Electoral Court fighting fake news, and you bring extremely important points. I just briefly would like to highlight one of them. This contrast that we exist, and is one of the most relevant points between the global nature of those platforms are using the expression platform in the broadest sense possible, including medias and search engines, and they are this nature that is global, and this contrasts with the demands and needs that are local and the jurisdiction of each country. This is certainly one of the great challenges that we have ahead in the regulation of duties in general. And I remember last year of having participated in the early this year on an event on technology and elections in Madrid, and there we discussed an aspect that is curious. Both social media and search engines in general, I don't want to refer to anyone in particular, all of those platforms use technology, AI, preparing their algorithms, the internal engineering of algorithms, their design to actually build not exactly a community that is global, but uh, infinite small communities. This is very simple to understand regarding social media, for example. If the person has a social media and accesses it, and all the time you see information, messages, news that do not interest the user at all, after 1, 2, 3 days getting there, they would never go back again. If they go to a search engine that does not minimally bring results, so you seek knowledge and you do not get the knowledge that you're seeking, nothing related to what is core for the user, they don't go back. It's simple. As simple as that. Whilst they are global, algorithms make them to be very, very local because you must, for example, in the social media, you group people according to their interests so that the kind of information interest that exists in certain segments circulate specifically in that segment, not segments that want to see that type of message. This is very interesting for us to observe because sometimes this is a romanticized idea that the social media are global. Actually, to finalize, I think practically everyone has mentioned that. Professor Belli and Ms. Tesser, of course, AI is used and should be used in a favorable way for us, I mean, society. AI, new technologies, algorithms may be used well to the benefit of the electoral process and to the benefit of democracy. Obviously, yes. However, my viewpoint is a personal opinion. Great part of it today depends on the collaboration of platforms because they are the ones that not only write through their engineers and experts, they write the algorithms, the functioning or operation of algorithms, but most of them actually dominate and master AI. The success they obtain is their merit. They've reached where they are because of their merit. And today they have this position that is dominant. And I'd say that the collaboration of platforms is absolutely key. And hence, the court has been calling and been able to have the collaboration of the main platforms. With this, we have reached the end of our panel. I would like to once again thank the participation of everyone that has been able to collaborate with us in these reflections. Thank particularly the presence of all of you, and thank, of course, those that have made it possible holding this event, this panel, everyone that has been decisively contributing to this. And this is also an event sponsored by FGV Comunicação and carried out by the National TSC School, directed by Minister Floriano de Azevedo Marques. Thank you all very much. And after this, we'll have the closing of our seminar. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, after the presentations, the TSE thanks for the participation of the authorities that were members of this panel. In a few moments, we will talk about the composition of the closing panel. Thank you very much.
Você acha que, desculpa te interromper, quanto tempo você acha? 10 minutinhos. Ah, tá.
E,
Isso eu tirei de um report do ano passado, agora eu precisaria checar onde é que está. Eu não lembrei de memória.
Bom dia a todos e todas. Mais uma vez me apresentando.
Good morning, everybody. Today I will be the MC in the closure of the seminar, a seminar that was so timely and relevant. I have the pleasure of announcing the members of this panel, who are His Excellency, the Chairman of the Superior Electoral Court, Mr. Alexandre de Moraes, the Minister Benedito Gonçalves, His Excellency, the Director of this PCA Group, Minister Floriano de Azevedo Marques, His Excellency, Minister André Ramos Tavares, the First Secretary of Political Affairs, Pedro Bandeira, and the Deputy Director of TV Comunicação, Rio Amado Garcia, and the CEO of Lupa Agency, Natalia Leal. Ladies and gentlemen, for the closing of this seminar, talking about challenges to democracy, we give the floor to Alexandre de Moraes, the chair of the Superior Electoral Court. Mr. Minister, you have the floor. Good morning, everybody. I would like to greet our inspector, Mr. Benedito Gonçalves, the Minister of the TSE, the Director of the Judiciary School, Mr. Azevedo Marques, Minister André Ramos Tavares, and also the First Secretary of Political Affairs of the Embassy of the European Union, Maria Bandeira, and the Deputy Director of FGV Communication, Mario Gatti, here in Rio, and the CEO of the Lupa Agency, Natalia Leal. I'm not going to make a presentation 11:30. Nobody is very much concerned with so much after the seminar. Probably you're hungry, but I would like to make some reflections that seems to be important here, considering democracy and social media, the democracy and big techs, democracy and this new populism that is extremist and that use the media, digital media, to erode basic principles of democracy. Yesterday, at the opening, I mentioned that the big evil, the great danger of the 21st century concerning democracy is the total lack of control of social media. Because it is not a lack of control that is full and total with anarchy. It is a total uncontrol that is guided, and this is the greatest danger. If we had a total lack of control with anarchy, we would have problems, of course, but we would have fewer problems than we have today, because there is a method. There is a scientific method. There is a purpose. There is ideology. That is what started way back as a project of economic gains only. Currently, it's a project of power, of political power, a project of ideological achievement, is a project for destroying enemies. What were political adversaries first, ideological adversaries? They became enemies. They're mortal enemies. Hate speech, homophobic speech, racist speech, misogynist speech. And why do I affirm that it is a project with purpose? It is not something anarchic, it's something guided. Because if we analyze way back, if we check how this partnership, this relationship with this stable union between the people, democracy, and its socials all began. The first time that social networks were used as an instrument related to democratic issues, political issues actually, the first time was during the Arab Springtime. You all remember in countries like Egypt, major manifestations where freedom of speech was not possible, freedom of press inexistent, the right of gathering inexistent. So how did people gather together? They did it. They managed to do it with groups. It was not a fax that Minister André mentioned before. It was the mimeograph that I advocate. Most of you don't even know what a mimeograph is. It's the grandfather of the fax machine. It is the father of the carbon paper and the grandfather of fax. So people, or Orkut also, this goes back to Minister, and then they decided, they started making appointments for these meetings. And social media in the first moment were used to guarantee rights, to guarantee manifestations, to guarantee the advocacy of democracy. And great movements, political movements, are not unseen by major groups. Either they are political or economical groups. After that, we saw that there was a huge potential of or for social media, for good or evil. And the social media, they are not good or bad, just like artificial intelligence is not good or bad. What makes one or other good or bad are people. It is how they are used. And big groups started studying this, and we have to admit always, because we cannot unqualify the adversaries, we have to admit that they were very competent, studying the way they could address how to use algorithms, how to capture and store all data from all people, all countries, including Brazil. They approve data protection laws and a fight over here, fight over there, lawsuits. And every day, all of us always freely supply hundreds of personal data that are fully stored. What you like, what you dislike, what you ask for eating, what you read, the videos that you watch, what are your preferences, everything, absolutely everything is stored. All data are stored, all data are reworked with artificial intelligence, and the algorithms go on directing what these groups expect and want from us. What we should think of, how we should understand things. So these algorithms, they work in a sense of a brainwashing, massive brainwashing. And this use start on an economical point of view. This is the first instance, and then sometimes I always repeat this, but you say that you would like to buy a red shirt. And then all of a sudden, you receive emails from everything that is red, ads, WhatsApp. When you go to Google, and you see a book. First of all, you get all the red shirts, and then you say that it's a spy film. They are listening to what I say. They are tap wiring me. And certainly you don't even remember. You did a browsing first one, and then you forget it's okay, Mark, that you like red shirts. And they start being worked and directed. Look, this person likes this, the other person likes that, and the algorithms, depending on the database and all the data that they have from people, there are preferences. And when you query, it already directs it to you. Now, to get more consumer, to do the brainwashing concerning the consumer, for this to move to the voter, a small step. If we manage to do this with the consumers, why not change and use the methodology, but change the purpose and check and target voters? And then we target the voters, making bubbles. Today we live in different worlds, bubbles. People only talk with those who agree with their opinions. It's a retro feeding of the same ideas. The greatest beauty of democracy is diversity of opinions, the polite discussion of ideas. We don't find that anymore. Why is the world polarized? Because people close themselves in bubbles in social media, one feeding the other with the same ideas, bombarded by hate speech concerning those who have different ideas. So we don't find dialogue anymore. We don't find a conversation. And after this mechanism that obviously I'm even saying everything in a very simplified way, but after this mechanism, this methodology, which is extremely competent, was and is extremely competent, we understood that there was a need for the purpose of achieving power, that what starts with economic issue goes to the achievement of power, and achievement of power brings money in its wake. So it was seen that there was a need to challenge and to annul or put aside the three basic pillars of Western democracies. And this happened in Hungary, in Poland, in Italy, in France, in the US, in Brazil as well. For us here in Brazil, it is very easy to understand this, analyzing the past 5 years. So we have lived this. This methodology has been applied in Brazil, and the result was even more serious because two of the pillars that I will mention of democracy in Brazil, they are very much intertwined differently from other countries. So what was with this methodology, after this methodology and the constitution of bubbles of the trust of people in bubbles, these achievements happened first with the text, then with images, and then videos that are true that people like, with the collection of data of the preference of one person or the other. After a small truth, you go on developing a narrative that builds lies, builds the famous fake news, the fraudulent news. So this starts, and something that returned a lot fear of communism. Many people don't even know what communism is, but everything, the communism is to blame. Brazil is at the brink of communism. Not even China is communist anymore. It's the communism, but how does it start this? Well, the person does a survey and sees that the person is a right-wing person. One has an ideology that he wants some sort of information about communism. Start challenging communism, start disrupting, and then say, and this person, this political party, these authorities in Brazil are communists. from a true narrative. What is the communism, explaining the Berlin Wall, the failure of communism, but these people want communism to come back, and then you create an enemy. You create an enemy, and you place a negative feature. The communist and this bubble hates that and makes the immediate connection, capturing the trust of many millions of users. Then first, it was made the first attack to one of the pillars of democracy, which is the press, the free press, media, freedom of press, the reliability on the press. There is no democracy, at least in the form that we know of the Western democracy. There is no democracy without freedom of press, without a strong, robust press, aware and responsible. And then they started attacking the traditional media through social media. That newspaper is communist, that broadcast company is communist. So the credibility of the media was the challenge. And why is this? To be able to mess with the news. So what we see today, a true piece of news that is disclosed in all telejournals have kind smaller reach than the fake news about the same fact that is disclosed by two or three influencers, YouTubers, people, many people, these users that were included by the social fakes. They cannot differentiate a newspapers of credibility, a media of credibility, and fake news. Everything for them is the same thing. This was the first achievement of this populism that is also extreme. The person places behind her that panel, you know, those shelves with many books, and sometimes the person moves a little bit backwards, and you see the books overlapping the ears. I don't know how, it's so silly, but people continue using. You do like this, the books appear and goes and comments and puts under the title expert. And the persons talked about the Brazilian championship until the war in Ukraine. But they have 30 million followers. They don't have much patience to hear to see if the Brazilian championship is being held in Ukraine. It's more this influencer that throws a quote of hate or quote of prejudice or political ideology, and it gets the loyalty of more and more people. They were very successful with this because it's an unequal fight. This is an unequal fight. It's a fight just like police against the bad guys. Police have to follow rules. The bad guys don't follow any rules. The traditional media needs to follow rules. It is the constitutional binomial, liberty with responsibility. There is the chief editor that analyzes the facts. He can make mistakes, of course, we all do mistakes, but he analyzes the facts, produce the piece of news. There is responsibility. The social media has no responsibility. It's irresponsible. And to guarantee this total irresponsibility, and also I mentioned that yesterday, there is no word that is more repeated by this extremist populism that is freedom. They want freedom for everything, to kill, to arrest, to use guns. You go to the supermarket with a rifle. If anybody looks them with a strong face, they can shoot. So they can make people confused. and match what is true news with fraudulent news. After this objective was accomplished, and actually this was made in the whole world, you can see how many issues of newspapers are released today, of magazines, and also the audience rating of journals. So there are many people, most of them, that only switches on their TV. Those who have conditions to watch streaming, they don't watch television anymore, and news only what the Zap groups conveys. That is only fraudulent news, because no true news will be conveyed. And also this, and I gather together many times with the hype text, and this only gives likes and audience, only give money, with a hate speech or with fight antagonisms, or with that, I say that's so cute. The little dog that took care of the kitten, the lion that was adopted by a chicken. Everybody loves those things. And until the day the lion eats the chicken, right? After the video, that. So the leopard that was created with a Doberman, people get lost the whole day watching this. I believe that I'm offending many people who are here who adore this and say, ah, how ridiculous. He doesn't know anything about art. But it's the whole day. It's a practice here. One day, 200 years, they will make an analysis on how the world lost time, how everybody, instead of going to work, wait a minute and go there with, look, the little chicken swimming together with a duckling. So either it's this or it's communism.
Okay, they're going to put in schools, maybe bottles, and people believe because they have become loyal to this. Either it's Alice world is silly, sorry, or a radical one. There is no longer a normal world of debate, a world of analysis. All the news are shallow because social media, well, we not us. Well, at the time of Minister Benedito, people said that previous day newspaper was only used to wrap fish. Well, there was a headline on the newspaper. Well, one day it's gonna go. Next day, today in 15 minutes, the news is outdated. There is another video, another piece of news. So there's this shuffling. And as this extremist populism managed to do that, and then there was a second major pillar started attacking the Western democracies, which are free elections, regular ones, with secret voting. In other words, the instrumental way of ensuring democracy. Nowhere in the world, even dictators that managed to, through this method, reach power, they're not against democracy. You don't see dictators being against democracy. They have been forced to take power to ensure democracy. It is because the other group did not want democracy. So they were forced, they will sacrifice this day 10, 15 years in power till they manage to establish democratic limits. No one of those groups, whether in the Eastern Europe, the rest of the world, in Brazil, and our neighbor Argentina, none of those groups are against democracy, but all of them attack the instruments that materialize democracy. All of them are in favor, as I said previously, to the freedom of them and of democracy, but not this democracy that is uh, has this vices with political historical groups that are against the country. This democracy that the traditional media influences, we can not accept this democracy that has electoral frauds, and then they attack the instrument. It doesn't matter, and this is what in Brazil many people did not understand. It doesn't matter whether the instrument that materializes democracy is the electronic ballot, or whether it's voting by letter allowed by the United States, or if it is a smoke sign. It doesn't matter. What matters is remove credibility of the instrument to claim that there has been fraud in the result, and only one person could win. Populists say that. Populists say that I am a Democrat and speak in low tone. As long as I win the elections, I'm a Democrat. The people love me. See how many people I take to the streets. If I did not win the elections, there's been a fraud. It was like this in the United States. Here in Brazil, it would be absurd for us to think about voting by a letter there to ensure a presidential election that re-elected Lincoln during the secession war. There was a possibility to vote by letter, as severe crime if there were frauds on those voting by post. Both parties actually know that Democrat voters vote more via letters than Republicans. Obviously, then, those that attacked that was the Republican candidate. Well, there is fraud here. Numberless fake news frauds. You produce videos showing the letters that the letter is open, etc., and they bombard people because then you remove the credibility of the instrument that materializes democracy. Look, well, a voter will think, well, if my vote is being fraud fraudulent, many millions of people are not voting in a reliable way. So it is not possible for us to continue with this false democracy. The same thing has been done in Brazil. Electronic ballots are, they can be frauded, or there can be fraud on electronic ballots. What was the fraud? This started in 2014. It is ridiculous. 18, it came back, and from 18 to 22, it's expanded. The famous videos in which the person would enter a number. The first video is ridiculous. There's even cut, very poorly made. The person entered a number, and another candidate would display. Nobody. Well, people went to the person responsible saying there was a problem. There were fake videos produced, but this spreads, disseminates. And then those videos are guided to people that already are tending to believe. And then what starts is what I am sure that if not everyone, the great majority here has heard. Somebody comes to you, says, a friend of mine pushed a number and another one came up. To give credibility, you cannot say that was a video. So you say it's been a friend, a relative. I heard this person close to me saying, look, I was still deputy at the Superior Electoral Court, and my friend entered it, and there was a fraud. Oh, cool. Ask her to be in touch, to share the data. Let's investigate. No data. 1 day, 2 days, a week. And then I said, well, My friend. Well, actually, it was not a friend. It was a friend of friend. But then there's a video, and then the famous video arrives, cut off. You don't know who made it, but to give credibility, you get a person that is close to you. And then this was increasing and increased because this populism that is extremist was able to explore the pains of people regarding democracy. Actually, what was sown in a fertile ground, if people were not disappointed of great layers of society, uh, basically worldwide, the middle class is disappointed, traumatized, that end up being put in the account of democracy, this would not have proliferated so much, considering our taking re-democratization of the world after World War II. We will see the great advance that democracy has brought to the world. Democratic government, universalization of education, with all its problems, but universalization of education, universalization of health, the drastic reduction of child mortality, the reduction in many continents, including South America, of hunger. But even with all the advances, at a given point, democracy was unable to resolve and even has stressed something that was felt at moments of crisis, the total reasonability in income distribution. People started at moments of crisis to have some nostalgia, many times mistakenly, accusing democracy and political groups that order and command in democracy. So we have some examples, some actually radical for people to think about that, but many people feel that. Brazil, before 1988, especially, but historically, there was no universalization of education. The mandatory access for all children in school age, mandatory access, and they're accounting parents for educational abandonment, or millions of people started going to school. At a given time, great part of middle class, this is a discourse that still exists today. In my time, public school was good. Now it's much worse. Look, at the time of the military, public school was good. Why now with democracy is it poor? Because of corruption. And then obviously the cases of corruption that came up during democracy, that only came up that were penalized because we are in a democracy. Because in dictatorship, we had corruption the same way, but the press was controlled and the controlling agencies too. But there is this connection. It's no use you're explaining that only middle class attended public schools because the less privileged social classes did not even go to school. So middle class would attend middle public schools. They were good teachers. The dec- the 1960s, there were even many private schools with the universalization. Public schools absorbed those classes, and middle class had to seek private schools. There was more cost, and there is this nostalgic feeling. And this has not been resolved from the standpoint in improving income. The successive economic crisis in Brazil, well, Brazil, US, great examples of extremist populism. 6th of Januaryism attacked the Capitol Hill, and 8th of January attacked the spread of the three powers, our Senate. The middle class was upset about the inclusion of the other classes into consumption. How many people have not heard at a given time in Brazil the middle class people say, we can no longer travel by plane, it's become a bus station. Nothing more prejudiced than this. So just as you're saying, well, I could travel by plane, but now the other, we had a minister, no names to be mentioned, we had a minister that said they were complaining it was an absurd. Well, there was a domestic servant that wanted to take a kid to Disney World. Most part of middle class started feeling upset with the inclusion of the other classes. I lost my job to a foreigner. In Europe, this xenophobia has made the UK to leave the European Union. It's an unbelievable thing. What acted there? Social media. It's exactly the same procedure. And here, people from the south and southeast say, I'm losing my job to the northeasterners. And what and this prejudice has been enhanced. So there's been this exploration, and the economic crisis led to this disappointment to democracy, and it made it easier to attack the instrument, which were the electronic ballots. Nobody ever has proven, because there's never been a fraud. People that won for decades the elections suddenly felt it was better to say that there was a fraud, not in the ballots that elected them, obviously in the neighbor's ballot. In other words, this discourse was possible first because the traditional media was already weakened, but this disappointment regarding democracy and populism came up. If we study the history of the world, populism only comes up at times of disappointment of people, when people feel disgusted and nostalgia. And then there is a sort of someone to save the land. It never works, but human beings never learn. So once the second pillar is attacked, America, voting via letter, frauds in elections, Brazil, electronic ballots. No, let's not use electronic ballots. There will be fraud. And then there's an attack to the third pillar of Western democracies, which is the judiciary or branch or the judiciary agency, the branch of the government that is judiciary, its independence, especially regarding constitutional courts that have grown through the democratization post World War II with creation of constitutional courts in all European countries. Constitutional jurisdiction, this idea of the existence of an agency, power to enforce the Constitution, even regarding other powers, this starts actually in a strong way. Well, in Austria, it existed since 1928, and in the United States since 1930. It starts strongly after the end of the Second World War. Populism needs to annihilate that, and three methods have been used in various countries. Actually, the new populism, co-opting the oligarchy or dictator that wants to take part. wants to actually co-opt members of high courts with benefits, perks, increase in wages if they cannot co-opt the changing of the composition. Any coincidence is a mere, or any similarity is a mere coincidence. Let's increase the number. We must increase the number, or perhaps reduce the age. This is the most ridiculous of all. Reduce the age of retirement and remove those that are already there. No, I had 3 more years. No, you have 5 years being reduced and you leave. That was done in Poland, in Hungary. In Poland, so the mandatory retirement was actually brought down 5 years, and so 5 justices were left, and the chair had to be taken out by the military. AI2 in Brazil, after the military coup, did that. It increased from 11 to 16 the ministers of the Supreme Court. They did not fill in our plenary. That's already small. We cannot increase it because it's cultural or historical heritage. Well, if 10 do not fit, let alone 16, but they were increased. Menem did that in Argentina. Fujimori did that in Peru. So you try to expand, but to expand, you have to have the support in this coup, in this new populism. You must have the support of the Congress. Otherwise, you have to close Congress. If there is something that a new populism that is extremist, this new digital extremist populism that is based on social media to have its power, if there is something they do not adopt, is old-fashioned code. You don't need tanks in the streets or shutting down Congress. They want to communicate directly with the extremists of the people. If there is no co-opting and no changing, let's move to confrontation. Let us put the judiciary in disbelief. This is what was attempted and done in Brazil. Let's move to confrontation. Everybody remembers that it was enough to have a soldier and another soldier to close the Supreme Court, colonel, soldier, all arrested, and the Federal Supreme Court open and in operation. But people said that was enough to have a soldier and another military and a soldier, since they were not soldiers. Thousands of people destroyed the building of the Supreme Federal Court. It was a confrontation, but confrontation to the judiciary to try to precisely ensure this new populism. Ignoring and social media help to dequalify the judiciary, looking for the bubbles and going, how can a court that has not been elected by the people make this decision, declare that this is not constitution, this and that, ignoring the historical accomplishment in the detachment of powers, which is constitutional jurisdiction, the assurance of constitution, which is a source of legitimacy, both of the elected powers and technical power, which is the judiciary.
So this attack will not happen only in Brazil. This attack is promoted in all those countries where the new extremist digital populism rose. And currently, and now I'm going to close, and currently the big techs, they cannot say that they don't know that they are being used. If there was any question about that some time ago, today we have no question. There is no possibility of big techs and social media saying that they ignore, that they don't know that they are being used. They do know, and they have made profit on that. And so it is necessary today to have a regulation. It is necessary all over the world to have regulation. It's not possible that only one industry is the only one in the history of mankind without regulation, without being regulated, with discourse that they are only sheer deposits of free manifestation of people. Then why don't they leave the copyright as an issue? They remove very quickly, otherwise they will be held accountable. If they are sheer repositories, so why do they direct pushing certain news that give them more economic benefit? Well, they are not sheer repositories. They are corporations that in capitalism, the system, they want to make a profit. No problem about that, but they need to be regulated. I always repeat also that for me, just simply have an article in the law or an understanding that the Federal Supreme Court, when judging Article 19, will provide what we cannot in the real world, we cannot in the actual virtual world either. We don't need anything else. We don't need a 600 article code. Can we do it on the real world? The press can do these attacks? No. So in the virtual world, it's forbidden as well. Where cowards hidden under the use of false name, they attack people, they offend, they propagate hate speech because they cannot do it face to face. They don't do it in the real world. They are cowards, actual cowards that are virtually brave, but they don't even identify themselves in the virtual world. It is HST 4.5, and then they get a place that routes through Dubai and comes here. So what you cannot do on the real world, you cannot do on the virtual world either. In the real world, if you rent a shed from somebody and this somebody makes a lab to refine coke, you cannot be held responsible. You didn't know. But if you become aware and then you request 10% so that they can continue using your shed and another 5% to send clients to push, you will be made accountable. Why in the virtual world, if you push and make a profit on hate speech or fraudulent news, you cannot be held accountable. You should, and you must, and you will be held accountable. So this is the rule that should be effective. Responsibility and liberty with the same and identical responsibility that we find in the real world placed on the virtual world. And this was the reasoning of the resolutions of the Supreme Electoral Court from the elections on 2022 to the elections of 2024. There is a bill approved by the Federal Senate that moves forward on this, even with users of social media providing their ID being mandatory. People can fraud that. Okay, then you go after the fraudulence. But to close and to finish with this unidentified process, this bill, unfortunately, still is halted in the Chamber of Representatives. Now we have a new task force to move forward in this analysis, but we need to be aware that there is a need of a regulation and of making people accountable, because not only there is an attack to democracy, we saw attacks, and the instruments continue available to prepare new attacks, and also it attacks the dignity of people. The suicide of teenagers have increased around the world because of the bullying through social media. It's not possible that somebody still is so irresponsible of advocating that social media can everything and they continue as so, being a land without law. It's not possible that these people don't have children and nephews, nieces, and we who believe in a state respecting the rule of law, we that respect fundamental rights and the dignity of human people, we have to get united to guarantee a regulation, the appropriate regulation to guarantee freedom of speech, to guarantee serious attack with the use of artificial intelligence, not only to democracy, but also to the basic pillars of a society in the way we live together. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had a very good event. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Now we close this seminar. And so on behalf of the TSC, I thank for all the authorities that attended and enriched this event with their presentation and exchange of ideas. And I also thank everybody that were present in person or virtually. Good afternoon to all. Thank you.